Ever feel like you're playing catch-up, trying to keep up with native English speakers? Like, even when it's English, it's like they're speaking something else completely?
Yeah. It's a really common thing. We spend all this time learning English from textbooks, right?
Yeah.
All those words and grammar rules.
Right.
But then you actually talk to someone.
Right.
It's like, whoa, totally different.
Totally. That's why that video you shared about how to figure out fluent English,
Yeah.
that was so interesting to me. The way she used Mark Zuckerberg as an example was really smart.
Yeah, not who you'd expect. Right. Not exactly known for being like the most captivating speaker.
Exactly. Like he's not using all this fancy language, It's so direct and to the point you really hear it when he connects the words.
Absolutely.
Like that clip where he's talking about being late for class. Should we give that a listen?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, audio clip plays. I was running late for class, so I threw on a t-shirt, and I didn't realize until afterwards, as I put it on inside out and backwards, my tag was sticking out the front. I couldn't figure out why no one in class would talk to me.
Okay, so like on paper, that seems pretty simple.
Right.
But then he says it.
It all just runs together. And here's the thing, he's doing it on purpose. If you try to write out how he says, and I didn't realize until afterwards, phonetically. It's more like, and in turn realizing afterwards.
Wow. You're right. I never thought about it like that before. He just pushes all the words together.
Exactly. And it's not about how fast he's speaking either. Well, it is, but it's more about the rhythm of it. It's natural. Native speakers just do it without thinking about it.
Which I guess is why it's so hard to pinpoint. As a learner, what am I missing? Exactly. Because you're listening for a break between the words where there often isn't one.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we get better at understanding it? Because just knowing it's connected speech doesn't make it any easier.
You're right. That's where their language coach's advice is actually really helpful.
Yeah.
She recommends an exercise using any English TV show.
Okay. What is it? Subtitles.
Subtitles.
But here's the catch. You only turn them on if you absolutely can't understand what's being said. You have to force yourself to listen and figure it out.
That's actually really clever. So you're actively listening instead of just reading along.
Exactly. And then when you do have to use the subtitles, don't just read it and move on. Stop, rewind, listen again, pay attention to how the words are connected. Right. Really think about it. I can see how that would be helpful. You're training your ear, right? It's like learning an instrument or something. You don't pick it up and play it perfectly the first time.
Exactly. You have to practice. You mess up.
Yeah.
It's the same with language.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, so we've talked about the speed and the way words get kind of mushed together. What about the grammar? Because I know that can change too when people are talking quickly.
So for sure. And it can be so subtle that you don't even realize. Like in the video, the example she used was, what are you doing versus what do you do? When someone says that naturally, they sound so similar.
Totally. I bet most learners don't even realize they're different grammatically. Can we hear those just so people can hear how tricky it is?
Yeah, definitely. Audio clips play. What are you doing? What do you do?
Okay, yeah. If I wasn't paying attention, I would think those were the same.
And that's where understanding the grammar can really help. So what are you doing? That's present continuous. So it implies that something's happening right now.
Right.
But what do you do? That's simple present. So it's more general. Like, what's your job? Or, your hobbies, that kind of thing.
So even though they sound basically the same when someone is speaking quickly, knowing that helps you understand what they're actually asking.
Exactly. It's like this extra layer of understanding, and then you can keep up even when everyone is talking fast.
And this happens all the time, right? It's not just those two examples.
All the time. What did you do last night? Or does that mean?
Right. Those are the most common things you say to people.
Exactly. But when a native speaker says them, they all blend together. It's like a code.
Okay. I'm starting to get why this is so important. It's not just knowing the words or the grammar, it's how native speakers put them all together.
Yes. You're bridging the gap between textbook English and real English.
So we've covered speed and grammar, but she talked about something else that just blew my mind. It's not just words being connected, it's whole phrases that turn into something you don't even recognize.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like the words just disappear sometimes.
Right. There is this clip from a TV show that she played in the video. I swear I've even heard this one in real life and it still throws me off. Audio clip plays. You wouldn't have said it if you didn't mean it. Okay, so good luck saying that 3 times fast.
Right.
You would not have becomes you wouldn't have, or sometimes even you wouldn't. I mean, come on.
It shows how much we just instinctively understand based on the context, we don't even realize we're doing it most of the time.
That's true. And I feel like this is where a lot of learners get tripped up because you're trying to catch every single word and then it's just like, wait, what happened?
And you know what? Even when you're experienced, you still have those moments. It's totally normal. It's more about kind of getting a feel for how English works instead of trying to understand every single little thing.
Yeah, I like that. Building awareness rather than expecting to understand it all perfectly right away.
Exactly. Think of it like, when you're learning an instrument, you can't expect to be amazing immediately. You have to practice. You get better over time. And then you start to hear all the subtleties and everything.
Love that analogy. So it's like, instead of being intimidated by this stuff, we should just be impressed by it. It's part of what makes English interesting, right?
Exactly.
So what else did she talk about that was interesting? Audio clip plays. Are you guys really thinking about getting another housekeeper? Because, I mean, how would you feel about paying me to do it? A little experience. It gets me every single time. A little experience. It's like one word. How is that even possible?
Because she's connecting the speech. The A sound is really short and the T almost disappears, so it's just a little experience.
Oh my gosh, you're right. It's like she's doing magic or something. And most learners would never even realize they're missing that.
See, this is why having examples is so helpful.
Yeah.
It makes you pay attention to those little things that happen all the time in English.
So connected speech isn't just this like abstract concept. It's literally everywhere, even in super simple phrases.
It is. And the more you start to understand it, the easier it is to figure it out in real time. Like you're unlocking a secret level of English or something.
It makes you realize it's not enough to just understand it, right? You have to be able to actually do it yourself.
Oh, 100%. I mean, think about it. When you're learning a language, you don't just want to understand it. You want to use it, be a part of it. And that's a huge part of how English sounds so natural.
Okay, I'm with you. But for someone listening who's like, whoa, this is a lot. Where do I even start? What's like the one thing to take away from all of this?
I would say the biggest thing is don't get so focused on trying to hear each word separately. Pay attention to how the whole sentence sounds together, the rhythm of it. Listen for the important words, the stressed sounds, and don't worry about the rest.
I like that. It's like giving yourself permission to not be perfect. Because real conversations aren't like perfectly grammatically correct anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hey, remember that exercise we talked about with the subtitles?
Yeah.
That's honestly so helpful.
Pick a show, turn the subtitles on if you need them, then really analyze it.
And don't just listen. Say it out loud. You'll feel how your mouth naturally wants to say the words together.
Yeah.
And then your brain just kind of figures it out on its own after a while.
It's like muscle memory, but for your ears. So the key to understanding all this is to stop thinking so much about each word by itself and think about the whole thing.
Yes, exactly. Like English has a musicality to it.
Oh, this has been awesome, by the way. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
Oh, before we finish, there's one more thing from the video I wanted to ask you about. She mentioned contractions, like gonna, wanna, all those ones that you'd never write down.
Right. We use them so much without even thinking about it.
I know, but then it made me think, is it bad to use those too much? Like, does it make you sound less fluent if you use them in certain situations? Like, I wouldn't say that in a job interview.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Hmm.
Because on the one hand, everyone uses them all the time. But you're right, in a more formal setting, it would sound strange.
It's like there's these unspoken rules, knowing when to be casual and when you need to be more formal.
Which, actually, that's a big part of being fluent, too. When you think about it, it's not just about being correct. It's about knowing what to say at the right time.
So even tiny things like a contraction can change how people see you. It's about finding that balance between sounding natural but also, like, appropriate. Wow. We could do a whole other deep dive on this.
Right. There's always something else to learn.
Well, this has been amazing. Definitely a lot for everyone to listen to and think about. Thanks so much for this.
Thank you. This was great. Ever catch yourself scrolling through those, fluent in 3 months ads online? You're like, yeah, right. Like, that's ever going to happen.
Happens to the best of us.
It's so tempting, right? But today's deep dive is all about, ditching those language learning fantasies. We're getting real about what it really takes to be fluent.
I love it. Sign me up.
And for this one, we're doing something a little different. We're diving deep into a single source, a YouTube video transcript, actually.
Oh, interesting. So not like a textbook or anything.
Nope, not even close. But that's what's so cool about it. It's surprisingly insightful. And this creator, they don't sugarcoat anything. They come right out and say, No shortcuts, no magic tricks.
Refreshing, isn't it?
Totally. They actually call out those fluent in 3 months claims
Mhm.
directly. You
Huh.
know, they even talk about the frustration so many people feel when those promises fall flat, which, let's be honest, we've all been there.
Oh, yeah. Been there. Felt that.
Right. And what I found helpful is how this source, they emphasize that it's okay to feel that way. Like, it's normal to hit those bumps in the road, whether you're just starting out or you've been at it for years. Everyone goes through those phases of, questioning things, trying new methods, maybe even feeling stuck
It's all
sometimes.
part of the process, right?
Exactly. And they made this point that I thought was really interesting about all the different factors that actually influence your language learning. It's not just about like how much time you put in, but also the methods you use, your learning style, even just life happening around you.
It's so true. We often forget about that part, don't we? Like, life doesn't just stop because we're trying to learn a new language.
Exactly. Now, this isn't to say that there aren't ideal learning situations. And this source, they do point to full immersion as, well, kind of a fast track.
Makes sense. I mean, constant exposure, real life interactions. It's got to be like a language learning pressure cooker.
That's a great way to put it. And they even say that this kind of immersive experience can lead to fluency in like 6 to 9 months, depending on the language.
Wow. That's pretty fast.
Right. And this is but they're also realistic. They know that not everyone can just pick up and move to a new country for 9 months to learn a language.
It's like the dream, but not always doable.
Exactly. And the creator, they totally get that. And I really appreciated how they shared their personal experience. They actually achieved conversational fluency in about a year, all through dedicated self-study.
A year! That's impressive.
Right. And here's the thing. They've never even lived in an English-speaking country.
Wow. That is really encouraging, especially for people who might not have access to those immersive environments.
Exactly. It shows that it's definitely possible. And, I also appreciated their honesty. They were very open about the fact that they're still learning,
Yeah.
still refining their skills. They don't claim to be perfect or anything.
Which I think reinforces the idea that language learning is a journey, not a destination.
100%. And you know what else they pointed out? Something I never really thought about before. They said that even native speakers have to work at it. Yeah. And they used some really interesting examples to illustrate this point. Like they talked about Larry King, the talk show host.
Oh, yeah, I know who you mean. What did they say about him? They were saying how he was always practicing. Like, he really emphasized that as the key to becoming a better communicator.
It makes you think about those athletes, right? Or musicians. Like they're always practicing their craft, even when they're naturally gifted.
Totally. And it's not just about, like, hitting that perfect note or whatever. It's about that dedication,
Yeah.
that constant push to be better.
100%. And speaking of pushing boundaries, they also talked about Kathy Heller, the podcast host.
Oh, right. I think I saw that part. She had a really interesting story, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. It's actually pretty amazing. She struggled with speech as a child,
Hmm.
had to go to speech therapy and everything.
Wow. Seriously. And now she hosts a podcast.
I know. It really shows you what's possible. But anyway, that whole story, it reminds me of, well, my own experience with public speaking. I used to get so nervous. My voice would shake. My palms would be sweating.
Tell me about it. Stage fright is real.
The worst. But anyway, how did you deal with it? You clearly overcame it.
Honestly, just practice, practice, practice. I joined Toastmasters, started small,
Yeah.
and just gradually took on bigger and bigger roles. Each time that nervousness would start to creep in, I would just remind myself that everyone starts somewhere.
That's a good point. We're all work in progress, right? And it's that 10,000-hour rule in action. Speaking of which, didn't the source also bring that up? I think they mentioned Oprah Winfrey, right?
Oh, yeah. They talked about how she always says that success doesn't happen overnight, right?
Yeah.
And they connected that back to the 10,000-hour rule.
Right. So it's not just about dabbling, is it? It takes real commitment. But I'm curious, how does that work with something as, I don't know, as nuanced as language? It's not the same as playing the piano, right?
Right. And that's where it gets really interesting. We're not talking about, like, literally clocking in 10,000 hours of speaking practice. It's more about accumulating those hours across all aspects of language acquisition.
Oh, I see. So it all counts.
Exactly. The listening practice, the articles you read, even just, stumbling through writing an email, it all adds up.
So it's more about the principle of consistent effort, not necessarily the exact number of hours.
Yeah, precisely. Think of it like this. It's a cumulative effect, right? Every interaction, every attempt, even every mistake, it's all contributing to your overall fluency. And what's fascinating? This applies to, well, not just your overall ability, but also to specific skills within a language.
What do you mean?
Well, like, are you ever really done mastering those tricky French pronunciation rules? Or are you always kind of working on it?
True. I still haven't mastered that rolled R.
Exactly. Or think about like mastering those tonal differences in Mandarin. Or, anything that makes a language unique, those little nuances, those require that same dedicated practice.
So no shortcuts, huh?
Nope, no shortcuts. Just patience, persistence, and a lot of practice. Speaking of things that require patience, I think the source also addressed something that a lot of language learners struggle with: grammar anxiety.
Oh, don't even get me started. It's so easy to get bogged down in those rules. Like, we think we need to speak perfectly from day one.
Right, but the source makes a really important point about that. They said you don't need to be a grammar expert to be fluent. Think about it. When was the last time you sat there and, like, analyzed the grammar of your friend's text message?
Never.
Exactly. We don't do that in our native languages, right? So why are we putting all this pressure on ourselves to do it when we're learning a new one?
It's so true. So their message is basically, don't let grammar be a roadblock. Just focus on using the language, expressing yourself, even if you make mistakes along the way.
100%. Now, I'm not saying we should completely ignore grammar, of course. It's still an important part of language learning. It's about finding that balance.
Right. Don't let it hold you back from actually using the language. Which, speaking of, the source had some really practical suggestions for finding those practice opportunities.
Right, because at the end of the day, practice is key. And they made a good point about how there are options for, well, every budget, really, from completely free resources to paid services.
Totally. Like on the free side, they mentioned language exchange websites. And, oh, what about those local speaking clubs?
Oh, yeah. Those are both great options. I've heard good things about language exchanges. You get to connect with native speakers all over the world.
It's amazing. And sometimes it's even free, or at least really affordable.
Exactly. And local speaking clubs, those are great too. It's more of that in-person thing, which I think can be really helpful for some people, especially when it comes to building confidence.
Totally. Although if you're anything like me and appreciate a little more, I don't know, structure, the source also talked about some paid options, like italki, for example, or even just hiring a tutor. I actually tried italki a while back when I was trying to brush up on my Italian before a trip.
Oh, cool. How did you like it?
It was amazing. It was a game changer, honestly.
Yeah.
Having that structured practice with a native speaker, even if it was online, it just made a huge difference. I felt so much more confident. I mean, I even managed to navigate those crazy winding roads in Tuscany without.
Without getting hopelessly lost.
Exactly.
That's awesome. See, it works.
It does. And, I think the big takeaway is don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Try different methods, try different platforms, different learning buddies, whatever. See what works for you. It's all part of the journey.
So true. And speaking of the journey, the source ended on such a great note. It was all about embracing the process, like even the awkward parts.
Because, let's be real, there will be awkward moments.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make mistakes. We're going to stumble over our words. Heck, we're probably going to feel a little silly sometimes.
It's inevitable, but it's all part of it, right?
It is. And actually, I think those awkward moments, those moments when we step outside our comfort zones, that's where the real learning happens.
Totally agree. And you know what? That actually reminded me of something else the source said. It was towards the end there. They asked this question, and it really stuck with me. They said, if you know why you need to study this language, or really anything for that matter, if you have that ultimate goal in mind, do you have the motivation and strength to keep going?
That's such a powerful question, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the how, like all the grammar drills and the flashcards and everything. But if we don't have a strong why, a reason that really resonates with us, it's easy to lose steam when things get tough.
It's true. So I guess the question is, what is it that motivates you? What got you interested in this language in the first place?
Right. Like, was it the dream of connecting with people from a different culture,
Yeah.
experiencing the world through their eyes?
Maybe it was about finally having that conversation with the grandparent in their native tongue. Or, being able to travel to a new city and not have to rely on that phrase book.
Or maybe it's about unlocking new career opportunities, expanding your horizons.
Whatever it is, hold on to that. Write it down. Visualize it. Remind yourself of it when things get tough.
Because that's what keeps you going. That's your fuel. That's what helps you push through those plateaus and celebrate all those little victories along the way.
Exactly. And those little victories, they add up. Remember, fluency isn't about perfection. It's about progress.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
So to everyone listening, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep that why close to your heart. You never know. Maybe one day you'll be the one inspiring others with your language learning journey.
And we'll be here to cheer you on every step of the way.
Until next time, happy learning.
Welcome to this deep dive on language learning. We're really diving deep into your notes and articles today
Yeah.
about how to unlock fluency in another language.
Yeah.
You're clearly serious about mastering a new language. You've got ambitions. This isn't about just dabbling.
Right.
This is about really getting to a level where you're comfortable and confident.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. What we see here is this emphasis on efficiency
Yes.
and even like unconventional methods.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't about memorizing verb conjugations, right?
Right.
It's about understanding the strategies, the techniques that really work best for you,
Yes.
and then putting them into action.
It's like the source material says, it's like a strategic operation.
Yeah.
You wouldn't like launch a military campaign
Right.
without a clear objective, right? You wouldn't
Yeah.
go into battle
Yeah.
without a really well-defined plan.
Yeah.
Language learning, this source is saying, is no different.
Absolutely.
It all starts with, what is that crystal clear goal?
It's about having that laser focus
Right.
right from the get-go. Like, are you someone who is picturing yourself confidently navigating a foreign city?
Ordering food without breaking a sweat, yeah.
Exactly. Closing a business deal, perhaps, in another language.
Mm-hmm.
And the more vivid, the more specific you can get with that vision,
Oh, yeah.
the stronger your motivation is going to be.
It's so true. Like when I was learning Italian, for example, I plastered photos of the Amalfi Coast all over my apartment.
Yeah.
And every time I looked at those photos, I was just like, yes, that's what I'm working towards.
Yeah.
I want to be able to speak the language when I'm there.
It's so powerful. Because it taps into that emotion.
It does.
It's not just a logical, oh, I should learn this language. It's an I want to.
It's a yearning, right?
Exactly.
But it's not just about dreaming big.
Right.
The source also really stresses the importance of, okay, but let's take stock of where we're at right now. What is your situation?
Exactly. It's about, taking that honest look at yourself, right? Your available time, your resources, your learning style. I mean, a busy parent, for example, who's juggling work and family life,
Yeah, sure.
they're going to have a very different approach than, let's say, a student who's got a lot more flexible hours.
So different, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not about, guilt tripping or anything like that. It's about working with your reality.
Yes.
Not against it.
Okay, so we've got our Amalfi Coast pictures up on the wall. We've taken stock of how much time we actually have.
Right.
What's next?
Well, just like any good general, you've got to identify your weaknesses.
Okay.
What are you good at grammar, but then you get into conversations that you just clam up?
Yeah.
Are there certain sounds, maybe, that just make your tongue tie itself into knots? I mean, these are the things that by pinpointing those challenges early on,
Yes.
it allows you to really target your efforts strategically.
You're not wasting your time.
Exactly.
You're focusing your energy where it's needed most.
100%.
Okay, so we've got our battle plan in place.
Okay.
Now it's time to choose our weapon. In this case, our language learning method. And the source really doesn't disappoint here. It presents us with 4 distinct methods.
Okay.
And I'm really excited to dig into these. Let's start with the systemized method.
All right.
So this one, I'm guessing this one's for all the organizers out there.
Absolutely. If you thrive on structure, routine, this is the method for you.
Yeah.
Think like meticulous schedules, dedicated study spaces, notebooks overflowing with verb conjugations, grammar rules.
Color-coded notebooks, maybe?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's all about intentional, organized effort. And I love that the source even goes so far as to suggest like pre-planning your materials
Wow.
for each day of the week.
So it really is like having a personal trainer, but for your brain.
Yes.
You've got your workout regimen all planned out.
Yes. And just like a good workout routine, consistency here is key.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, the source actually emphasizes consistency over intensity.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's actually suggesting that starting with even just a little bit each day can be far more effective than these sporadic cram sessions.
Wow.
Where you're just like, I'm going to do 5 hours today,
Yeah.
and then nothing for 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little and often.
Little and often.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race, or in this case, achieves fluency. But for those who prefer a more spontaneous, all-in approach, there's the immersion method. This one sounds both terrifying and exhilarating.
It can be both.
Okay.
Sure. It's about fully immersing yourself in the language, surrounding yourself with it as much as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like being dropped in the deep end of a pool you're forced to swim, or in this case, speak the language to stay afloat.
I love that analogy. The source actually uses the example of how children naturally learn language. They don't sit through grammar lessons before they start speaking, they pick it up through constant exposure and interaction.
Exactly. Think about a child listening to their parents, siblings, and other children. They might not understand every word at first, but they gradually start to make sense of the sounds, the rhythms, the patterns. It's about absorbing the language organically, almost subconsciously.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, for those who, like me, appreciate a bit of both worlds, the structure and the spontaneity, there's the combined method. Tell us more about striking that balance.
This method is all about blending the structured approach of the systemized method with the intensity of immersion. Imagine supplementing your daily activities, which are already in your target language, with focused practice sessions. You might be watching foreign films and listening to music in your target language, but you're also carving out time for grammar exercises or using language learning apps.
It's like cross-training for your brain. You're getting that constant exposure to keep your comprehension muscles limber, but you're also hitting the gym, so to speak, to strengthen specific skills.
Exactly. And finally, for those who prefer a more laid-back approach, there's passive learning.
This one sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's about absorbing the language naturally, almost effortlessly, like having language learning podcasts or foreign films playing in the background while you go about your day. The key here is to be curious. If a word or phrase piques your interest, hit pause and delve a little deeper.
It's like letting the language seep into your brain while you're doing other things. I love it. So we've got four very distinct approaches: systemized, immersion, combined, and passive. And what I find fascinating is that the source doesn't play favorites. It emphasizes that the best method isn't one size fits all. It's about finding what works for you.
Absolutely. The most effective method is the one that aligns with your personality, your learning style, your goals, and your lifestyle. It's about recognizing that we all learn differently and that there's no shame in choosing a method that feels natural and sustainable for you.
It's like finding the right workout routine. What works for your marathon running friend might not be the best fit for someone who prefers a gentle yoga class. The key is to find an approach you enjoy and can stick with. But no matter which method you choose, the source is adamant about one thing: active application.
Yes. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's not enough to just study the language in isolation. You have to actually use it. Whether it's joining a conversation group, striking up conversations with native speakers online, or even just posting on social media in your target language, it's about taking your knowledge out for a spin.
I love that analogy. It's like learning to drive. You can read the manual all you want, but you'll never really learn until you get behind the wheel and hit the road. And speaking of practice, the source also emphasizes the importance of repetition.
Absolutely. Repetition is key, but it doesn't have to be boring rote memorization. One technique the source highlights is using spaced repetition software, which is designed to help you remember new information more effectively. Essentially, it shows you flashcards at increasing intervals, so you're constantly refreshing your memory.
That's a great tip. It's like having a personal vocabulary trainer that knows exactly when you're about to forget something and swoops in with a timely reminder. But beyond the techniques, the source emphasizes the importance of mindset, of focusing on the journey, not just the destination.
It's about celebrating those small victories, mastering a new grammar rule, successfully ordering your coffee in your target language, or even just understanding a bit more of a foreign film than you did last week. These small wins might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but they're what keep you motivated and engaged.
It's so easy to get bogged down by how much you still don't know. I remember feeling that way when I first started learning Spanish. But then I started noticing those little victories, like understanding the gist of a conversation on the bus or being able to crack a joke in Spanish with my friends. Those moments were so rewarding and they kept me going.
And that's what the source encourages, a shift in perspective. Instead of saying, "I'm not fluent yet," try saying, "I'm learning something new every day." It's about embracing the process, the ups and downs, and remembering that every bit of effort, no matter how small, brings you one step closer to your goal.
It's like training for a marathon, isn't it? You wouldn't expect to run 26 miles on your first day of training. You'd celebrate every mile you conquered, every aching muscle, every bead of sweat, knowing that it's all part of the journey.
Precisely. And speaking of the journey, the source also addresses those moments when you feel stuck, like you're hitting a wall. It points out that sometimes we claim to be trying everything, when in reality we're not fully committing to any particular method.
It's like someone saying they want to lose weight but then refusing to give up their daily donut. You can't expect to see results if you're not willing to make some changes.
Exactly. It's about being honest with yourself, about the effort you're putting in, and being willing to adjust your approach if needed. And sometimes it's about getting a little creative. The source talks about finding those hidden pockets of time throughout the day. Your commute, your lunch break, even those few minutes while you're waiting for the coffee to brew.
I love that. It's about squeezing in those micro-learning sessions whenever and wherever you can. Instead of scrolling through social media while you're waiting in line, why not review some flashcards or listen to a language learning podcast?
Exactly. It all adds up. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Even if you only have 5 minutes to spare, those 5 minutes can make a difference.
It's so true. It's so easy to get caught up in thinking about everything you don't know yet. I remember when I first started learning Spanish, I would get so frustrated with myself. Like, why can't I remember this grammar rule? Why does everyone speak so fast?
It's so common, though, that feeling.
But then I started to notice these little victories along the way, like, oh, I actually understood the gist of that conversation on the bus. Or, hey, I just made a joke in Spanish and my friends actually laughed.
Those are such important moments.
They were so rewarding, and they really kept me motivated, to keep going.
And that's really what this source is encouraging. It's that shift in perspective, right? Instead of focusing on the negative, I'm not fluent yet, you shift to, I'm learning something new every day.
I love that.
It's about really embracing the process, the ups and downs,
Yeah.
and remembering that, every little bit of effort you make, no matter how small, it all adds up. It brings you one step closer to your goal.
It really is like training for a marathon, isn't it? You wouldn't expect to just go out and run 26 miles on your first day of training, right?
Exactly.
You'd be celebrating every mile that you conquered, every ache and pain in your muscles.
Absolutely.
Like, yes, this is good. This is part of it.
It's all part of the journey.
Exactly.
And speaking of the journey, the source does also acknowledge those moments where you kind of hit a wall, you feel stuck.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, we say, oh, I've tried everything, nothing's working. But are we really committing to any one method fully?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like that saying. It's like someone who wants to lose weight, but they're not willing to give up their daily donut.
Exactly. It's like, you can't expect to see those results if you're not fully committing to making those changes.
Yeah, okay. So true.
It's about honesty, right?
Yeah.
Honesty with yourself, about the effort you're putting in.
Yeah.
Being willing to adjust if you need to. And sometimes it's about getting creative. The source talks about finding those hidden pockets of time throughout the day.
Oh, I love that.
It could be your commute, your lunch break, even just those few minutes while you're waiting for your coffee to brew.
Yeah.
You can turn those into these little micro-learning sessions.
I love that. Micro-learning sessions. Instead of scrolling through social media while you're waiting in line,
Exactly.
why not review a couple of flashcards?
Exactly. It all adds up.
It does.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Even if you only have 5 minutes to spare, those 5 minutes can make a difference.
Well, that's so encouraging to hear, and I think it's a perfect note to wrap up this deep dive on.
Absolutely.
It's about finding what works for you, sticking with it, and celebrating those small victories along the way. So until next time, happy language learning, everyone. Ever have that moment where you know what you want to say in English, but it's just not there?
Yeah.
Like you've got the thought,
Right.
but your mouth's not cooperating.
Exactly.
Yeah. So today we are tackling a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking in English.
Yes. It's huge.
Which is way more than just like
Yeah.
your vocabulary list.
Absolutely.
It's really like rewiring your brain.
It really is. It's like you're building a mental bridge directly from the thought to spoken English.
No, that's good.
Which is what you want for that real fluency.
Yeah, exactly.
Not even just fluency, but like, that ease of speaking.
Yeah.
So we're diving into your sources
Yes.
to figure out how to actually do that.
Let's get practical.
Because flashcards and subtitles,
They're good, don't get me wrong.
they're tools. They're part of it. But they only get you so far, right?
Okay, so this source
Yes.
jumps right into the why bother.
Love that.
Why is thinking in English so important?
It's such a good question because so many people skip over that.
Why? Why? Tell me.
So this source says, imagine trying to navigate a city
Okay.
but you're constantly translating the street signs in your head.
Oh my gosh. Exhausting. I get it.
Right. So that's a long way around.
That is a really good analogy.
So thinking directly in English,
Yeah.
that's what gets you off that mental hamster wheel.
So it's about being able to, like, react in real time,
Exactly.
not getting stuck.
Yes.
Love it. Okay, so another point this source made
Okay.
is that languages have their own internal logic,
Mm-hmm.
and they use the example of phrasal verbs,
Oh, yeah, those get everybody.
which, I mean, come on.
I know.
Sometimes they make no sense.
Right.
Give up does not translate literally.
It really doesn't.
At all.
No, and it's so easy to get tripped up on those.
Totally.
Like if you're thinking about the words separately, it's like give up.
Right.
But this source is saying when you're thinking in English, you start to just get it.
You absorb it.
It's a feeling.
Yeah.
It becomes less about memorizing all the exceptions
Okay.
and more about just like the music of the language.
Oh, I love that.
Right. It just flows.
Yeah, it's like you're feeling the music of the language. You're not just like
yes,
reading the sheet music.
not just the individual notes.
Yes.
And speaking of music,
Okay.
this source also talks about fluency under pressure.
Ooh.
Like imagine you're a jazz musician,
Okay.
right? You're in the groove, you're jamming,
Yeah.
but then you have to stop mid-song to translate every note into a different musical scale.
Oh my gosh, talk about a buzzkill.
Right. It was so jarring.
You would totally lose the flow.
Exactly. You'd lose all spontaneity.
And it's the same with language.
It is.
When you're not translating constantly, you're less likely to freeze up.
Right, because your brain's already working in the right language.
Exactly.
So even if you forget that one specific word,
yeah,
you can find a workaround.
your brain's on it.
It's already there.
Yeah.
Like this source gave this example.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to order,
Yeah.
that fish, it's silvery, lives in the ocean.
Instead of just salmon, which has completely left your brain.
Exactly. Which we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
But you can still communicate.
Yeah.
And this source had a really clever breakdown
Okay.
of the journey to thinking in English.
I like it.
Because it's a process, right?
It is a journey.
It's not like a light switch you can just flip on.
That would be amazing, but sadly, no.
Right.
It's a process.
So they break it down into stages.
Which is less intimidating.
So what's step one on this path to thinking in English?
Tell me.
Passive listening.
So I'm not actively translating in my head.
Oh.
I'm just letting the sounds of
Just bathe in it.
wash over me.
Exactly. Like developing an ear for the language.
Like how a baby would learn.
Kinda. Yeah,
Okay, so that could be like listening to a podcast in the background,
totally.
having the TV on
Mm.
while I'm doing other things.
Even if you're not really paying attention.
It's about familiarization.
Exactly. Just getting those sounds into your brain.
Okay, I can do that.
And then we level up
Oh.
active listening.
All right, so what does that look like? What am I doing?
So this is where you're really engaging with the material.
Okay, so I'm listening to that podcast, but now I'm like taking notes.
Yeah. You're jotting down words you don't know.
I'm really trying to follow along.
Maybe you're trying to summarize what you're hearing.
Okay.
Or like have a little conversation with yourself about it afterwards.
So it's more intentional.
It is.
It's more about like pulling out meaning.
Yeah, and building that vocabulary.
Okay.
And this source stresses this so much. Look up words immediately.
Don't wait.
Don't put it off.
Don't let that thought escape.
Because that instant connection right then,
Okay.
that's what helps cement it in your memory.
Makes sense. Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Like if you don't look it up right, then it's gone.
yeah, it's gone.
Okay, so the next stage this source talks about is describing.
Okay. Describing.
And I thought this was really interesting.
Okay.
They compared it to being your own tour guide.
Oh.
But instead of describing what you see to someone else,
Yeah.
you're describing your own life to yourself.
In English.
Yes, in English.
I like it.
So it could be as simple as like, oof, this coffee's way too strong. Or like, man, my left shoe has a hole in it. How annoying.
I'm picturing that now. That's hilarious.
Right.
But it's like you're making that connection in your brain
Exactly.
between like those everyday things and how you would say them in English.
It's those little connections.
Yeah.
Okay, but it gets even more interesting.
Okay, tell me.
They talk about speaking your mind
Hmm.
in English.
Oh, speaking your mind.
So it's not just like narrating what you see.
Right. It's more like
It's your thoughts.
my inner monologue.
Exactly. Like that running commentary we all have in our heads.
Yeah.
And this source gave this great example. So you're watching a movie,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Instead of just thinking like, oh, that's so sad,
Okay.
try like verbalizing that in English in your head.
Oh, so like, oh my gosh, that scene was like really sad. I wonder what's gonna happen.
Exactly.
So I'm reacting authentically, but I'm doing it in English.
Yes. Like you're having a conversation with yourself, but in your target language.
Oh, I like that.
It's those little unguarded thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because usually those just pop up in your native language.
For sure.
But that's what we're going for, right?
That's the goal.
To think and react
It's
spontaneously
in English.
without that translator.
Okay, so what's next?
Okay, so now we get to the challenging part.
Oh, boy.
This is where you're consciously trying to control your thoughts in English.
Ooh, that sounds hard.
Yeah, this source doesn't really sugarcoat it.
Oh, okay.
They compare it to trying to catch clouds.
Oh, wow.
Like they're constantly changing, they're fleeting.
Yeah, your thoughts are all over the place.
But they say the key here is awareness.
So, like, just noticing when I've drifted back into my native language.
Yeah, that's already a win.
Oh,
So,
sure.
oh, I'm back in my mental mother tongue.
Right.
That means you're paying attention.
So it's about shining a light on those unconscious habits.
Exactly. And once you see it,
Then you can gently nudge it in a different direction.
yes.
Okay.
It's like training a muscle, you know?
You got to work at it.
It takes time, repetition,
Yeah.
patience.
But gradually it becomes more natural.
You got it.
Okay, that is encouraging.
Now, this source also raved about a specific tool,
Okay, what's the tool?
reading aloud.
Oh, that makes sense. I was wondering when that would come up.
It's a classic for a reason.
It is. But why is it so helpful for thinking in English?
So they made this point about how it engages multiple parts of your brain.
At the same time.
You're seeing the words.
Okay, I'm looking at them.
You're hearing yourself pronounce them.
Yeah.
They're actively processing the meaning.
It's like a multi-sensory experience.
It
It's
is.
not just one thing.
Right.
And like, English spelling sometimes.
Oh, don't even get me started.
It's a nightmare.
But this source is saying that's actually where reading aloud can be super helpful
Okay, how so?
because you're training your brain to connect the written form of the word
Yeah,
with the pronunciation.
right.
And that's crucial for fluent thinking.
So it's like I'm hardwiring those connections.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And then this ties into something else this source talked about, consistency.
Oh, yeah, they were big on that.
Like they were really emphasizing small daily habits.
Not those big, overwhelming gestures.
Howie, don't try to overhaul your whole life.
Right.
It's about those little things you can do every day.
They actually compared it to like
Okay.
a marathon runner versus a sprinter.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this.
So you're not looking for that quick burst of effort.
It's about endurance.
Exactly.
So instead of like forcing myself to only think in English for like hours,
Which would be exhausting.
probably impossible. It's more about finding those small, manageable ways to integrate it into my life.
Precisely.
So it's about those little moments.
Yes.
Like narrating my commute in English,
Right.
or like looking at the clouds and describing them to myself.
Perfect.
Or even like having a silent debate with myself about what I want for dinner, but in English?
You got it.
Okay, so it's about creating a lifestyle where English is just there,
It's a constant companion.
not this separate thing.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
It's those little things added up over time.
It really is. Like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
And this source actually said that trying to achieve fluency like overnight,
Okay.
it's like trying to learn piano
Okay.
by only listening to recordings.
You're not really getting your hands dirty, are you?
Right. Like you can listen to all the Mozart in the world,
Yeah.
but until you sit down at that keyboard
Yeah, you gotta like feel the keys.
and hit a few wrong notes,
Yeah. Make those mistakes.
that's how you learn.
Exactly.
So this source is saying that the magic happens
Okay.
when you just embrace those little moments of English thinking throughout your day,
Even if they feel insignificant at the time.
even if it's just like thinking about what you want for lunch.
In English.
Yes,
Okay.
because all those little things add up.
The rewiring your brain.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it.
And it's not even just about like language acquisition.
Okay.
This source made a really interesting point
Okay.
about how thinking in a new language
Yeah.
can actually broaden your perspective.
Oh, tell me more about that. I like that.
So when you're not translating everything back and forth anymore,
Okay.
you're forced to engage with the world in a different way.
Okay.
So you start to notice like the nuances of English culture,
Okay.
humor, thought patterns, things like
So
that.
it's like I'm stepping outside of my own little bubble
Exactly.
and seeing the world through a new lens.
It's like when you travel to a new place
Yeah.
and experience a totally different way of life.
It's challenging, but also really eye-opening.
Yes.
It makes you a more well-rounded person.
Absolutely. And this source was saying language can be a gateway to that.
I love that.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it,
It is pretty incredible.
that just changing the language you think in
Yeah.
can have this huge ripple effect
Yeah.
on your whole worldview.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what's like one key takeaway, one piece of advice
Oh, good question.
that you would give to our listener who's like raring to go with this?
Okay, so I would say number one,
Okay.
start small.
Don't try to do too much at once.
Exactly. Don't put pressure on yourself to be perfect from day one.
Yeah, that's just setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
So start small, but like, what does that look like?
So maybe just pick one or two little habits you can do every day.
So that could be like narrating my breakfast routine in English,
Perfect.
or like challenging myself to think one complete thought in English.
Waiting for the bus.
Exactly.
See? You got this.
Okay, I like it.
And remember, every time you catch yourself slipping back into your native language.
Which I will.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
We all do.
Don't beat yourself up about it.
It's not a big deal.
It's part of the process.
Just gently guide your thoughts back to English.
It's like we were saying earlier. It's like training a muscle.
It takes time and repetition,
And patience.
but if you're consistent with it,
Yeah.
you'll start to notice those English thought muscles getting stronger.
I love that. You got this.
I'm feeling motivated.
Yes.
So to our listener out there
Yes.
who's on this journey with us, to unlock fluency, be kind to yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Embrace the process and celebrate those small victories.
They really do add up.
Because they do.
Yes.
We are here to cheer you on every step of the way.
We believe in you.
That is it for this deep dive. We will see you next time.